Hi, I'm Sue, and I'm the pastor here. And I want to welcome you to our First Presbyterian Church YouTube channel. We are so glad you're taking time to watch some of our content. If this is helpful to you, would you take just a minute and hit that subscribe button right now? We hope these messages are encouraging and uplifting to you. Be sure to stick around after the message, and I'll give you a little bit more info about how you can get involved and be a part of all God is doing here. Our second reading is from the Gospel of Mark. It is a familiar story to many of us. It's often called the widow's mite, where Jesus praises even the smallest gifts and the sacrificial gifts. I want you to set aside everything you've ever heard about this story and ask yourself, what if it's not about that at all? So listen with fresh ears to Mark chapter 12, verses 38 through 44. As Jesus taught, he said, "Beware of the scribes who like to walk around in long robes and to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces and to have the best seats in the synagogues and places of honor at banquets. They devour widows' houses. For the sake of appearance, they say long prayers. They will receive the greater condemnation." Jesus then sat down opposite the treasury and watched the crowd putting money into the treasury. Many rich people put in large sums. A poor widow came and put in 2 small copper coins worth about a penny. Then he called his disciples and said to them, "Truly I tell you, this poor widow has put in more than all those who are contributing to the treasury. For all of them have contributed out of their abundance, but she out of her poverty has put in everything she had, all she had to live on." A word of God that is still speaking. Thanks be to God. So when God created human beings, God gave them 10 bananas each. I know you've been wondering why there's been bananas sitting up here on the communion table. God gave those first human beings 10 bananas and said, "I know you're going to need some for food and a roof over your head and clothes and all that. You could do whatever you want with those 9. Be generous with it. All I ask is that you give 1 back to me." So those first human beings, they looked at the bananas and they said, okay. And they took 3 bananas and they said, roof over the head, got that covered. They took a couple of bananas, food on the table. Couple more, everybody needs clothes. Went out and had a good time with friends. Bought a lottery ticket. Come on, you've all done it. And then they looked at this last one and they said, that is so much bigger than all of those other bananas. And it looks so good. And God has all of those other bananas. God doesn't really need this one, does God? And so, well, you know what comes next. They ate the banana. And then they gave God back the peel. Anybody want a banana peel? That's what happens when Charles and I get here early, so thank you, Charles. So often when churches are in their stewardship season, and we are, and for those of you who aren't familiar with that terminology, it's when the church has a period of time. It's kind of like the PBS fundraising drive with a faith twist, when we ask you to consider what you will give to the church in the coming year, because when we know what might be coming in, then we can better plan the ministries that we can do during the course of the year. So in our stewardship season, it's not uncommon for people to read this story of the widow's mite. And this is the woman who literally gave not the peel to God, and not even just that last banana, but all 10 of her bananas to God, to God's work. And we lift that up as an example to the rest of us in the hopes that you all will give just a little bit more. But did you notice what Jesus never said in this story? He never said, go and do likewise. So when I realized that, I got to wondering, is this story really about how much you give? Is it really about that sacrificial giving that we preach on every stewardship season? Could it be that this story is not about church budgets or fundraising drives? What if it's about reimagining what this world could be? What if it is challenging us to think about how we use what we have? Do we use it in a way that reflects our faith? If how I live doesn't reflect the values of my faith, or better yet, the hopes of my faith, then I should probably reevaluate how I'm living. I should probably reevaluate the world I'm supporting. Because faith isn't just an intellectual exercise. This is what we talk about every week. It's why we come back to church every week. Faith is not an intellectual exercise, and it isn't a transactional exercise. I give something to get credit with God. I think some of those that Jesus observed putting money in the treasury were actually doing just that. But faith is a way of life, and it is an expression of our hope. Our hope not just for ourselves, but for others and for the world. That's why Jesus could look at how the rich people gave out of their abundance and the widow out of her poverty and value her gift more. He was not encouraging poverty, but he certainly recognized that when you give what you don't need, you really aren't overly invested in what you say you're longing for or hoping for. But when you give what you need, you're committed. You have a vision. You have a hope that drives you. And so that's the question for us to ask ourselves. What is the hope that drives us? What is the vision we have for this world we want to live in? This world that we believe God wants for us. I'm going to let that question just marinate with you for a little bit. Let's look at what happened in the treasury that day. The treasury was where people went to give their donations to help the poor. It was a religious obligation. It was part of the Jewish law that if you had resources, you had to give to help others. Widows, the poor, were exempt. Makes sense. These were the people who lived on the very margins of society. They didn't have enough to live on. These gifts to the treasury were supposed to help those who didn't have enough to live on, so of course they should not have to give to it. It didn't make any sense. The intent behind that obligation was that we are responsible for each other. What we have isn't intended to benefit just us, but to make everyone's lives better. It's part of what it means to be a community. Now, the very fact that such an obligation exists says that their society was very comfortable with the disparity between rich and poor. They were okay with it because if they weren't, they'd be doing something more than just what amounted to soup kitchens and handouts. They'd be addressing the roots of the issue. The vision of God's world and the hope that we have isn't a world where the hungry are fed. It's for a world where no one is hungry. The year of Jubilee in Leviticus attempts to get at the root of the problem. It was a restoration of people's humanity in a world where, much like today, the economic system privileges those who could get more for themselves at the expense of others. You know, more for me, less for you, too bad, so sad kind of a world. The prophets condemned that. They called it adding field to field, which was simply the accumulation of wealth for one at the expense of another. So the year of Jubilee said that every 50 years, all that land that got stolen, that got taken away, that got sold, that got lost because of debts that couldn't be repaid, all of that land would be given back to the original clans they were given to in the first place. This is the next step of what we heard about last week, where every 7 years, monetary debts were forgiven, so no one had to live under that cloud of crushing debt their whole life. In the year of Jubilee, that source of income, the land, was to be returned. It was kind of like leveling the playing field back to when there was enough for everyone. So there would be no generational poverty like we know today, because every 50 years, the playing field would be leveled again. Probably no big surprise to learn that there is no evidence that the Jewish nation, the Jewish community, ever actually practiced this commandment for the year of Jubilee. Just like there's no evidence every 7 years they forgave debts. But that's the vision behind Jesus' comment about the widow's gift and why her sacrifice was so notable. She wasn't required to give, but she would have known firsthand that it takes everyone sharing what they have rather than accumulating it to have this world where no one was in need. And with her 2 small coins, she made an investment in that world. So the money story most of us grew up with, and certainly the money story we see all around us, is that the goal of life is to accumulate more and more and more. But the money story Jesus lifts up says, it's not about how much you have. It's about how much of what you have are you sharing. It's about reimagining what this world could be if we were all a little bit more like the widow. Let's go back to that question that I asked you a little earlier. What is your hope for this world? Your vision? Do you hope that there will be a day when there will be no more war? If so, how are you investing your time and your money and your prayers and your relationships in support of that vision? Do you hope for a day when no one will be hungry, when no one will be bullied, where no one will be without medical care or mental health resources? If so, how are you investing your time, your money, your prayers, and your relationships in that vision? It's often said if you want to know somebody's priorities, look at their checkbook. Look at what they're investing in. Look at what they're giving to. Look at what they're supporting. And how much? Are they giving just what they no longer need? The peel? Or are they going above and beyond because it's that important to them? What does your budget and spending say about your vision and hope for this world? What story does it tell? And what story would you like it to tell? Dr. Luke Timothy Johnson, he's New Testament professor at Chandler School of Theology, spent a lot of time delving into what the Gospels say about faithful use of possessions. And faith, he says, needs to be embodied in ever-changing ways. Embodied, key word, in ever-changing ways to the response, in response to the call of God. That embodied response in physical action, specifically the disposition of our possessions, is not symbolic in some weakened sense of the term, but in its fullest sacramental sense, it affects what it signifies. I can't even say the word today. Whatever that was. Any other time I could say this. That getting more stuff for yourself, that. Greed. My brain and my tongue are just, it's that day, I guess. Greed, oppression they all symbolize the response of idolatry. But every open-handed sharing of possession equally enacts the very essence of faith. When we worship the accumulation of things, that's what we live out. When the essence of our faith is sharing, that's what we live out. That open-handed sharing of possessions is powerful because it recognizes we are connected to each other. It puts flesh on our hope for a world where all are loved and where there is abundance for everyone and where everyone puts the needs of other people first. And think about it, if you live in a world where everyone puts the needs of other people first, then your own needs will be met tenfold because someone is putting your needs first. Embodied faith sees that other person. And that was part of the issue in the treasury. The rich gave out of their abundance. They gave out of obligation. Yep, some probably gave to get points with God. None of them noticed this widow giving her last 2 coins. They didn't see that the system wasn't working. And so their giving and thus their faith was without relationship. It was without context. Faith says, I belong to this God. I follow this Jesus who died for the sake of everyone in this world, who came so that all people might have abundant life. The act of giving is putting that faith into action because it sees the real people around us. If we don't see the people we say we're trying to help, if we don't know them, then what we're doing with the best of intention may not be meeting anybody's needs. Open-handed sharing invites us to reach out and really see that other person. Make sure that what we're doing makes sense. So what does that look like? Let's go back to that earlier question. What is your hope? What is your vision for this world? What kind of a world do you want to live in? What kind of a world does Jesus hold up for us to aspire to? And where do you see the disconnect between that hope and that vision and the actual world that we live in today? The next question is, what are you going to do about it? Will you get involved? Maybe that means finding others who are working to make a difference, working side by side with them. The New Justice and Action Coalition that we're a part of, that's what that is. We see the disconnect between the world we believe God intends for us and the world that we have, and it's like, we're going to see what we can do about that. And we pull together people to help. Well, maybe you don't have the ability to show up in person to do anything, but can you show up in other ways? Make phone calls, write letters, write a check, invite others, pray. And can you give from your resources even if it pushes you a bit? Maybe I should better rephrase that. Will you give from your resources even if it pushes you a bit? Because the reality is, if we never push ourselves to go just a little bit farther, nothing's going to change. Nothing's going to get any better. So the question is, with whatever ability you have, are you willing to put flesh on your faith? Now, what that looks like today may be different than what it looks like tomorrow, and that's okay. Tomorrow you're going to be a different person than you are today. You're going to have different abilities, different resources. So when we talk about putting flesh on our faith, it's going to look different for everybody. What one person can do may not be what you could do, but you may be able to do something somebody else can't do. But the point is, are we living out our faith? Are we letting the hopes and the dreams and the vision we have from God show in how we live and how we spend our money and how we use our resources and in how we treat others? So again, I invite you, take a look at your life and take a look at your checkbook. What story does it tell? And what story do you want it to tell? Amen. Thank you for listening to today's message. At First Presbyterian Church, we believe we aren't meant to do life alone. We were made to do life with others. If you're looking for a community of people who will meet you and welcome you and love you and accept you just as you are, then click the link below in the description and head over to our website, fpclincoln.org, to find out how you can join one of our groups or studies and get connected to other people. Or if you just want some information about the church or want to talk to someone, you can fill out a Connect card and someone from our team will reach out to you. The link for that card is also right below this video in the description. Every week, we get to hear stories about people who find God through these messages and whose lives were changed. None of this would be possible without the amazing generosity of the people here at First Presbyterian Church. If you would like to be a part of helping this life-changing message continue to go out online each week, you can make a donation. You can click on the link below in the description, or just click the Give tab on our website. Thank you for your generosity, and thank you for being a part of changing lives. And thank you for watching our video today. Be sure to look around our YouTube channel and check out the other messages to help you on your journey. And again, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you'll get notified every time we put out a new video. We love you, and we hope you have a great day.